Okay, get ready for this one, because today we're going deep on something you might not expect.
Ooh, I love a good surprise.
It's modesty, but not just like what you wear, you know.
Right, right.
Like we're going way deeper than that, I promise.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So we're diving into this podcast episode called Modesty, Femininity, and Yahweh's Guidance. It's from that Walking in His Light show.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, and they really get into how modesty, like it's not just about clothes, but behavior and history, even cultural differences.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and like how it all connects to you, like as a woman, no matter, if you're Gen X, Gen Z.
Right, right.
Okay, so let's unpack this. What really stood out to you when you're listening to this episode?
Well, I think they frame modesty as a principle, like a core value. Instead of just like a set of rules.
Okay, yeah.
So it's about reflecting godliness in all areas of life.
I see.
From, how you dress, to how you interact with everyone around you.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So like living it out rather than just checking off a list, huh?
Exactly.
I noticed they went right to the Bible too, like to back this up.
Right.
They quote 1 Timothy 2.9:10.
Right.
Which like it's talking about how women adorn themselves, but not with flashy clothes or tons of jewelry. Instead, they're adorned with good works.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, it's not saying don't be stylish at all, but it does make you think.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, what does it even mean to reflect godliness through your looks?
Right.
Especially like today.
In today's world, yeah.
What would that even look like, practically?
That's a good question.
And then they bring up 1 Peter 3.3-4. That one's all about inner beauty, right? The hidden person of the heart.
Yeah.
Does that, does that take the pressure off? Or does it just shift the focus?
I think it's a bit of both, honestly.
Yeah, maybe.
Because they're emphasizing that outward modesty, it should be an expression of what's already inside.
Okay, what's in your heart. So it's not about like ignoring how you look.
Right, right.
But making sure it lines up with your values, with what you believe.
So they're not saying you can't enjoy fashion, but it's about why you're drawn to a certain style.
Right. It's about examining those motivations. Yeah.
What's deep. And then it gets even more interesting when they talk about how this all ties to femininity.
Oh, yeah.
And they seem to be saying that, like true femininity, at least how they see it, isn't about fitting into, society's beauty standards or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It's about living out the way Yahweh, designed women to be.
Yeah. And they go all the way back to Genesis for this.
Yeah. Genesis 2.18.
Woman is created as a helper for man.
A suitable helper.
Which, I know that term, it can feel kind of outdated.
Oh, totally.
To some people.
Yeah, and it makes you think about how language, and how we understand these things, how they change over time.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
So how do they handle that then? Like fitting that suitable helper idea with how we see women today?
Well, they kind of turn it around. They ask, what qualities would a suitable helper even have?
Okay.
Compassion.
Right.
Nurturing.
Maybe wisdom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then how do those qualities, which are often linked to femininity, how do they challenge or maybe even confirm how we view women's roles today?
Right. Right. It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure.
It is.
And then it gets really interesting because they start talking about ancient Israel.
Oh, yeah.
And how back then long garments, like those were a sign of status.
Really?
Of honor. For women especially. And it's so different from today, It's almost like the more revealing, like the more powerful.
It's a real contrast.
What a shift, right?
Yeah.
What do you think that says about how our values have changed?
Well, I think it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, how do these shifts even happen? And what do they tell us about our social norms, as they keep evolving?
That's a good point.
And they even bring up Deuteronomy 22.5 in this whole discussion.
That's the one about cross-dressing, right? And I know that verse has a lot of implications, especially like for the transgender community today.
Of course, yeah.
But the podcast seems to be focusing on this idea of respecting a divine order.
Okay.
Like that there's this intentional design to the differences between men and women. It's definitely a complex issue. And we're not here to take sides or anything like that.
No, of course not.
But I think it is important to try to understand where these beliefs are coming from, that historical and religious context.
Absolutely.
Because they're coming at this from a traditional perspective on gender roles, But they do acknowledge that today things are becoming more blurred. Their lines aren't so clear anymore.
So where does modesty even fit in,
When those distinctions start to fade.
Exactly.
That's the big question.
Yeah. That's a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, how do we even navigate all of this?
Right.
And the podcast acknowledges that, like applying modesty today, it's tricky.
It is.
But they're really emphasizing it's not about like, sticking to all these like outdated rules. It's about understanding the principles behind them.
The why. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then figuring out like how do those translate
right.
to your life, your own context.
Exactly.
I appreciate that because it does feel less about, finding that perfect outfit.
Right.
And more about, making these choices that reflect what you believe.
Absolutely.
Where do you even begin?
Well, they actually have these 4 like application points.
Okay.
Which I think are really helpful.
Okay, lay them on me. So the first one is they call it like a heart check. It's all about asking yourself, why am I wearing this?
Oh, wow.
Like, are you trying to fit in,
right,
or impress somebody,
right,
or are you dressing in a way that actually lines up with what you believe?
Oh man, that is tough.
It is,
because it takes a lot of honesty.
It does,
and that can be so hard.
It can,
especially like when you're constantly being told,
oh yeah,
this is how you should look.
There's so much pressure, isn't there?
So much.
Yeah, and I think. It's easy to just get swept up in those trends.
Oh, yeah.
Or feel like you have to fit those expectations.
Oh, totally.
But this heart check, it encourages us to just pause and examine why we're making those choices.
I see.
And it's not about like judging other people.
Right. Yeah.
It's about being accountable.
To yourself.
Exactly. To your own values.
So it's like taking inventory. But of your wardrobe and your intentions.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've checked our hearts.
Right.
What's next?
So the second point is about dressing with dignity.
Okay.
And respect.
Got it.
And they're not saying you can't be stylish.
Right.
Or express yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, they're not saying it has to be like, one size fits all.
No, not at all.
When it comes to modesty.
Right. It's about being mindful of the message that your clothing's sending. And how other people might perceive it,
That makes sense.
Like a low-cut top, it might be totally fine if you're out with friends.
Sure.
But maybe not for a job interview.
Can you imagine like showing up to a board meeting, but in ancient Israel?
Oh my goodness.
In anything but a floor-length robe?
Yeah.
Talk about the wrong message.
Talk about a statement.
But seriously, it's about thinking about the context and being intentional about, how you're presenting yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting they connect that back to, inner qualities too.
Oh, yeah.
The third point is all about cultivating inner beauty.
Right.
And that being, what really matters.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah. And they even quote Proverbs 31.30 here.
I love that verse.
It says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears Yahweh, she shall be praised.
So good.
But I don't know, I can see how they're connecting inner beauty to modesty. But doesn't that, I don't know, kind of put too much emphasis on a woman's appearance? Even if it's, inner beauty.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be more about like her character,
right?
Her actions.
That's a good point.
Rather than how she looks.
Yeah, I think it's a balance.
Yeah.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
They're not saying that outward appearance doesn't matter.
Right.
At all.
Okay.
But that it should come from a deeper place. Yeah.
Like when your focus is on building your character and your relationship with Yahweh.
Right.
Outward appearance becomes less important.
So it's not about ignoring how you look, but putting it in its proper place.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then their last point for like applying modesty today, it seems like it really gets at that tension.
Oh, yeah.
Between what you believe on the inside and all that pressure from the outside world. Absolutely.
It's about standing firm.
Okay.
In your convictions, even when it's hard.
Yeah.
And they acknowledge, that it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when, society's telling you to conform.
Right.
They actually bring up Romans 12.2.
Okay.
Which which is that verse about, not being conformed to the world, but being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Right.
It's like this call to be countercultural, which can be kind of intimidating.
Yeah, for sure. Especially for women, I think.
Right.
Who often face, the most pressure.
Yeah.
When it comes to how they look.
All those expectations.
Yeah.
So the podcast talks about standing firm. Have you ever felt that pressure to conform, especially, when it comes to how you dress?
Oh, yeah.
What was that like for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Lots of times. It's tough,
It is.
Because you want to fit in.
Right.
But you also want to stay true to yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things clash.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're saying something even without words.
Yeah.
Just by how you dress.
Absolutely. It's a statement.
Like, this is who I am.
Yeah.
This is what I believe.
It is.
That's powerful.
It is powerful. And even if not everybody gets it.
Right.
Or agrees with it.
Right.
Right. I think the podcast reminds us that we're ultimately accountable to something higher.
To Yahweh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
More than just the trends of the world.
Right. Which are always changing anyway.
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
Wow. So we covered a lot, didn't we?
We did.
It wasn't just about hemlines and what to wear.
No, not at all.
We really went deep, didn't we?
I went to the heart of it.
Modesty, femininity, faith.
Yeah. And
how they all connect, with a society that's always in flux.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But I think, what really struck me is how the podcast makes it clear. Like how we present ourselves. It's not just superficial.
Right. It goes deeper.
Yeah. It's tied to our values, our beliefs.
Yeah.
How we see ourselves in the world.
It really makes you think. And here's something else to think about. The episode focused on women and modesty.
Right.
But what about men? Is there even such a thing as male modesty? What would that look like?
Yeah.
What would we find if we went deep on that?
That's a good question. It makes you wonder if those principles apply, across the board. And if so, like how they might be expressed differently.
Yeah.
In different cultures and stuff.
Oh,
it seems like there's always more to explore.
Always. So much to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.